She was drugged and forced to marry a stranger millionaire. But what happened next? Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The chandeliers above glimmered like frozen constellations, every crystal shard catching the light of the ballroom. The air smelled faintly of roses, champagne, and something else she could not quite place. Her head was pounding, her vision blurred, and her throat dry. When she tried to move, she realized her body was wrapped in a gown of white satin and lace. Her fingers trembled as they grazed the heavy fabric, and panic rose in her chest. A crowd of strangers surrounded her, whispering, applauding softly, some lifting their phones to capture the moment. She blinked, disoriented. "Where am I?" she murmured, but her voice was drowned by the music of a wedding march, echoing through the vast hall. Her gaze finally landed on the man beside her. He was tall, his presence commanding, his expression carved from marble. His eyes were a stormy shade of gray, cold and unyielding, as if he had already judged and sentenced her without a word. He extended his arm, and she realized with horror that she was standing at an altar. The officiant's voice boomed, solemn and clear. "Do you take this man as your lawful husband?" Her knees wobbled. She tried to speak, to protest, but her tongue felt heavy, her mind foggy. The last thing she remembered was sitting in a quiet cafe, sipping tea with a friend, and then nothing. Darkness, dizziness, and now this. She had been drugged. Gasps rippled through the audience as she swayed, but the man beside her caught her elbow firmly, his grip both steady and unyielding. He leaned in, his voice a low warning that brushed against her ear. "Say yes. You have no other choice tonight." Her heart hammered. Who was he? Why was she here? Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs would not obey. The officiant repeated the question, his tone growing impatient. The crowd leaned closer, hungry for her response. Tears welled in her eyes. Against her will, against her sanity, she whispered, "Yes." A roar of applause erupted. Cameras flashed. The stranger's lips curved into the faintest trace of victory as he slid a ring onto her trembling finger. The contract was sealed, and with it, her freedom was stolen. What she did not yet know was that this man was no ordinary stranger. He was the heir of one of the most powerful dynasties in the country, a millionaire whose empire stretched from towering skyscrapers to hidden networks of influence. To him, this marriage was a weapon, a shield, and a transaction. To her, it was a nightmare she could not wake from. As the guests toasted and music swelled, she stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, her voice locked inside her chest. The cameras captured a radiant bride, but inside she felt only terror. Her story had begun not with love, but with betrayal. And the man who now held her hand would become the greatest challenge of her life. The applause of the wedding guests still echoed in her ears long after the ballroom lights dimmed. The next morning, she awoke in a mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath her feet. Portraits of stern ancestors stared down from gilded frames, and the silence was so heavy it pressed against her chest. At the head of the grand dining table sat the man who was now, by law, her husband. He read through a stack of documents while sipping black coffee from a porcelain cup. He did not even look up when she entered. "You are late," he said flatly, as if she were a secretary summoned for a meeting. Her lips parted, anger rising despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "I did not choose this. I never agreed to—" He finally raised his eyes. The same gray storm stared at her, colder in the morning light. "Last night you said yes. That is all the world needs to know. The marriage license has been signed and filed. You are legally mine." Her hands clenched into fists. "I was drugged. I was trapped. This is not a marriage. This is—" "A contract," he interrupted, sliding a folder across the polished table. "You will find everything inside. Terms, conditions, allowances. In exchange for your cooperation, you will receive financial security, protection from scandal, and a lifestyle most women only dream about. In return, you will play the role of my devoted wife." She opened the folder with trembling fingers. Each page detailed her new life like a prison sentence. Appearances at charity events, scripted interviews with the media, and an ironclad clause forbidding her from leaving his side without permission. "This is insane," she whispered. "This is survival," he replied, his tone unyielding. "My family's fortune is bound to an inheritance clause. I must be married before the fiscal year closes, or the empire passes to my cousin. You were convenient. You were in the wrong place at the right time." Her stomach turned. She remembered the cafe, the tea, the sudden dizziness. Someone had set her up, delivered her into this nightmare. "I am not your pawn," she said, her voice quivering but determined. He leaned forward, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You are already my wife. The law is not interested in your feelings. Play the part well, and you will have comfort. Resist me, and you will find yourself ruined. No one will believe your story. To the world, you are the woman who married the millionaire by choice." Abu. Her breath caught. The truth was a cage, invisible but inescapable. Every newspaper headline, every photograph from the wedding already painted her as a willing bride. She stood, her chair scraping loudly against the marble. "You cannot own me. I will not let you." For the first time, his expression shifted. Not anger, not amusement. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the mask of control. "Defy me if you must," he said. "But remember, this house, this name, and every eye in this city now belongs to my world. You will learn to survive in it, or it will crush you." The walls seemed to close in as his words echoed. She looked down at the contract again, the ink still fresh, her name scrawled beside his in binding permanence. She realized then that her fight had only begun. Outside the mansion gates, reporters waited with cameras, eager to capture the first glimpse of the mysterious bride. Inside, the staff moved silently, already treating her as "Madam," bowing with rehearsed respect. But their eyes carried judgment, suspicion, and whispers she could almost hear. In that moment, she vowed silently. If this was a game of survival, she would not play merely to exist. She would endure, she would fight, and she would uncover the truth of who had trapped her in this marriage. Because deep inside her, beneath the fear, a spark of defiance refused to die. And that spark, though small, would one day ignite into a fire strong enough to challenge even the cold millionaire who believed he had won. Days passed inside the mansion, each one blending into the next. The house was enormous, with endless rooms decorated in luxury she could not even begin to feel comfortable in. Every hallway echoed with her footsteps. Every corner seemed to remind her that she did not belong here. She was the outsider in a palace built for power. Servants came and went, addressing her as madam with polite bows. Yet behind their lowered gazes, she could sense the unspoken doubts, the silent judgment. To them, she was the stranger who had suddenly appeared at the side of their master. A woman who had married into wealth not through love, but through a scandal shrouded in secrecy. Her husband, the cold millionaire, kept himself distant. In the mornings, he vanished into meetings, his car sweeping through the gates before dawn. At night, he returned late, still dressed in his immaculate suits, his face unreadable. They shared the same roof, but not the same life. One evening, while she was walking through the garden lined with marble statues, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found him there, holding a file in one hand, his gaze stern. "You are expected at the charity gala this Friday," he said. "Wear something appropriate. Smile when the cameras flash. And do not forget, to the world we are a couple in love." Her chest tightened. "You want me to lie to everyone?" "You will protect this family name," he answered, his voice calm but firm. "That is the role you agreed to the moment you said yes." Her hands shook at his words. "I did not agree to any of this. I was forced." He stepped closer, his presence filling the air. "The world does not care about the truth. It cares about appearances. You may despise me inside this house, but outside, you will be the perfect wife. Do you understand?" Her throat tightened, but she held his gaze. "I will not play your puppet forever." For a moment his mask cracked. He looked at her not with coldness, but with something else: curiosity. maybe even a shadow of respect. Yet just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the familiar iron wall of his demeanor. Friday arrived, and with it the gala. Under the glittering chandeliers of yet another ballroom, she walked beside him, in a gown chosen by his assistants. Cameras flashed as they entered, capturing the image of a radiant bride and her powerful husband. Guests whispered behind jeweled glasses of champagne, their eyes tracking her every move. She forced a smile, remembering his warning, but inside she burned. During the dinner, she noticed small details, the way he subtly guided her away from certain people, the way his hand lingered protectively at her back when reporters crowded too close. He did not touch her with affection, but with control, as if ensuring the mask of perfection never slipped. When the orchestra began to play, someone urged them to dance. She froze, but he extended his hand, leaving her no choice. On the dance floor, surrounded by hundreds of watching eyes, they moved together. His grip was steady, his steps flawless. To the audience, they looked like a couple in perfect harmony. But to her, every turn and every spin felt like chains tightening around her. Yet in that moment, as she met his gaze beneath the lights, she saw something flicker again, a crack in his armor. His eyes softened for just a heartbeat, and she wondered if the man beneath the cold exterior was more complicated than she dared believe. Back in the mansion later that night, silence stretched between them. She finally spoke. "Why me? Of all the women in this world, why trap me?" He set down his cufflinks, his back to her. "Because you are strong enough to endure it." Her breath caught. For the first time, his words did not sound like cruelty, but like recognition. As he left the room, she sat in the darkness, torn between hatred and confusion. Her life was no longer her own, yet deep inside, she felt the faintest spark of something unexpected, something that frightened her more than the marriage itself. Because despite everything, a part of her heart was beginning to wonder who he really was. The night after the gala, the mansion felt heavier than usual, as if every wall was watching her. She tossed and turned in her bed, the sound of the rain outside echoing through the halls. Finally, she rose and walked quietly to the study. She needed answers, even if they were hidden in the shelves of books or in the locked drawers of his desk. She had just reached for one of the files on the desk when the door opened. He stood there, still dressed in his tailored suit, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her. "You should not be here," he said, his tone low but edged with warning. Her hands tightened on the folder. "Then tell me the truth. Who set me up that night? Who drugged me? You know, do you not?" For a moment his gaze softened, then hardened again. He stepped closer, prying the folder gently from her hands. "Some truths are more dangerous than lies. You will hurt yourself digging where you do not belong." Her frustration spilled out. "You keep me in this house, you call me your wife, but you treat me like a prisoner. You talk about appearances and contracts, but what about humanity? What about me?" Before he could answer, the shrill ring of his phone cut through the tension. His jaw tightened as he read the message. Without another word, he grabbed his coat. "Stay here. Do not leave the house." But she could not stay. Something inside her pushed her to follow. The city streets were slick with rain as she trailed the black car that carried him. It stopped near a dimly lit warehouse at the edge of the industrial district. She crept closer, her heart pounding. Inside, she saw him facing a group of men in dark suits. Their conversation was heated, their gestures sharp. Suddenly, one of the men pulled out a weapon. Without thinking, she rushed forward, her cry giving away her hiding spot. The men turned, their eyes narrowing at her presence. Chaos erupted. She was shoved to the ground as fists and shouts filled the air. Just as a blow was about to land on her, he was there, shielding her with his own body. His voice roared above the storm. "Touch her, and you answer to me." The men hesitated, clearly recognizing the authority in his tone. They backed away slowly, muttering threats as they disappeared into the night. She clutched at his arm, shaken. "Why? Why would you risk yourself for me?" For the first time since their marriage, his mask cracked completely. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual coldness. "Because whether you like it or not, you are my wife. And I protect what is mine." Tears stung her eyes. "I never asked to be yours." He looked at her, rain running down his face, his gray eyes fierce. "No, you did not. But fate made it so. And I will not let anyone destroy what we are bound to." Back at the mansion, Silence hung between them. She sat by the fire, her body trembling from the night's events. He stood across the room, removing his wet coat. She finally whispered, "You saved me tonight, but you also trapped me in this life. How am I supposed to live with both truths?" He walked closer, his expression unreadable. "You live by learning who I really am. You think you are chained, but you are standing beside someone who carries chains heavier than you know." Her breath caught. The words were not a threat. They were a confession. For the first time, she began to see not only the cold millionaire who forced her into a marriage, but also the man carrying a burden that no wealth could erase. And in that fragile moment, she realized their story was no longer just about survival. It was about secrets, about truths buried too deep, and about a bond that was beginning to shift in ways she never expected. The scandal from the newspapers did not fade as quickly as she hoped. Instead, it grew louder. Everywhere she turned, whispers followed her. In the supermarket, women exchanged glances and muttered behind their hands. At the charity events, polite smiles hid judgmental stares. To the world, she was not a victim but a schemer, the woman who had trapped a millionaire into marriage. At night, she lay awake in the vast, cold bedroom, torn apart by questions. Part of her wanted to run away, to escape the cage and reclaim her life. Yet another part of her, the part she hated admitting, remembered the way he had protected her, the way his voice had softened when he spoke the truth by the fire. She was trapped not only by the contract but also by her own conflicted heart. One evening she confronted him in the study. He was standing by the window, city lights casting sharp shadows across his face. "I cannot breathe in this life," she said, her voice shaking. "Everywhere I go they see me as your possession, not as myself. And you do nothing to stop it." He turned, his eyes dark but weary. "You think I am doing nothing? I have fought battles in boardrooms, silenced threats that would have destroyed you. You do not see it, but every day I am at war to keep you safe." Her chest tightened. Safe is not the same as free. For a moment his expression faltered. She thought she saw pain flicker across his features, but then the mask returned. Freedom is an illusion. Everyone is bound by something: power, money, family, duty. This is your chain. Accept it. Tears burned her eyes. "I will not accept a life where my voice does not matter." The room fell silent. His fists clenched at his sides, his breath uneven. For the first time, she realized he was struggling too. He was not simply a cold millionaire controlling her life. He was a man battling shadows she could not yet see. The next day, the external pressure intensified. Reporters gathered outside the mansion gates, shouting questions and flashing cameras. Business partners of his family began to question the marriage openly, suggesting annulment to preserve the empire's image. Even members of his household staff whispered that she was not fit to carry the family name. She overheard one of his aunts say during a dinner, "This girl will destroy everything we have built. She should be sent away before it is too late." Her hands shook as she set down her fork. Every insult felt like a dagger. Yet when she looked at him across the table, he remained calm, silent, letting the words wash over him. That night, she confronted him again. "Why do you not defend me? Why do you let them humiliate me in front of you?" His voice was low, filled with restraint. "Because if I fight them now, it will only make them see you as weaker." Sometimes silence protects more than words. Her heart ached at the logic but also at the loneliness of it. She was caught between two cages, the judgment of the world and the cold protection of the man she was forced to call husband. Alone in her room, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. She saw not the girl she once was, but a woman fighting for heir in a life she had never chosen. And in that silence, she made herself a promise. If he could not give her freedom, she would create her own. She would uncover the truth of who had placed her in this marriage, no matter what it cost, because only then could she decide if she would stay bound to this man or break the chains forever. The storm of gossip refused to fade. Every morning, new headlines appeared, dragging her name deeper into the mud. Neighbors whispered that she was a schemer. At charity luncheons, women looked at her as though she were poison. Even when she walked the quiet halls of the mansion, she felt eyes on her, the staff murmuring just out of earshot. She was no longer a woman. She was a scandal, and it was suffocating. But the heavier weight lay within her own heart. She could not silence the memory of the way he had saved her at the warehouse, or the rare softness that had flickered in his eyes. Hate and longing warred inside her until she could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. One night, unable to bear the silence, she found him in the study. He was seated at his desk, the glow of the lamp carving sharp lines across his face. He looked up as she entered, his eyes weary but guarded. She took a deep breath. "Tell me honestly, am I anything to you beyond this contract?" His jaw tightened. For a moment he said nothing, then rose slowly to his feet. "Do you think I wanted this marriage? Do you think I wanted you dragged into this mess? You are here because someone wanted to destroy me, and they used you to do it." Her chest tightened. "Then why do you not let me go? Why keep me here?" His voice dropped to a whisper, raw with something she could not name. "Because if I release you now, they win, and I cannot let them win." The honesty in his tone startled her. For the first time she saw not only a ruthless millionaire but a man bound by enemies she could not see. Still, her pain burst forth. "And what about me? Every day I wake up in a cage. Every day the world spits on me. I am losing who I am. Do you not see that?" His expression shifted, the mask slipping. "I see it," he admitted softly, "and it tears me apart more than you know." But even as those words hung in the air, the world outside grew more vicious. Reporters camped outside the gates. Business rivals demanded proof that their marriage was real, threatening to withdraw support if he did not end it. His own relatives whispered about annulment. At a family dinner, an uncle raised his glass and said coldly, "This girl is a liability. Remove her before she destroys everything." Her hands shook as she pushed away her plate. She wanted him to fight back, to stand for her. But he sat silent, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. That night she burst into his study again, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why did you let them humiliate me? Why do you never speak for me?" He rose, his fists clenched. "Because power is not always won by shouting across a dinner table. If I defend you openly, they will see you as weak, and they will attack harder. Silence protects you, even if you cannot see it now." Her voice broke. "Protects me? I feel more alone every day." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, "You are not alone. Not as long as I draw breath." But the silence that followed swallowed those words whole. She turned away, standing in front of the window, tears blurring the city lights. Inside, her heart made a vow. If he would not fight for her openly, she would fight for herself. She would uncover the truth of who had drugged her, who had pushed her into this cruel marriage, and she would face it head on. Because only then would she know if her future lay beside him, or far beyond his shadow. Her vow to uncover the truth became the fire that guided her through the suffocating days inside the mansion. She began quietly collecting pieces of information, newspapers, overheard conversations, fragments of gossip that the staff thought she did not notice. Every clue pointed to something larger, an invisible hand orchestrating her downfall. One afternoon, she slipped into the archive room of the mansion, where years of business documents and correspondence were stored. Her fingers traced the spines of leather-bound files until she found a folder marked with the date of the night she was drugged. Inside were receipts from the very cafe where she had taken her last sip of tea before waking in the nightmare wedding. The signature on the bill made her heart stop. It was not his. It was a relative, someone from his own family. The realization crashed over her. She had not been the target by chance. She had been carefully chosen, trapped to ensure his inheritance and to destabilize him from the inside. That evening she confronted him in the study. Her voice trembled but carried steel. "I know it was someone close to you, someone from your own blood. I saw the receipt." He froze, the shadows from the firelight flickering across his sharp features. For a long moment he said nothing, then exhaled heavily. "I wanted to protect you from this truth. But you are right. It was my cousin. He wants the empire, and he used you to try to break me." Her stomach twisted with both rage and sorrow. "So I was just a weapon in a family war." His gaze softened, his voice quiet. "At first, yes. But now, you are far more than that. I cannot deny it anymore." Tears pricked her eyes. "Then fight for me. Not with silence, not with coldness. Fight for me with truth." For the first time, he reached out and held her hand, not as a contract, not as a possession, but as something fragile and real. "I will," he whispered. "But know this, when we bring the truth to light, it will tear this family apart, and it will put us both in danger." She lifted her chin, her heart pounding with both fear and defiance. "Then let it come. I would rather face danger with honesty than live another day in this gilded prison of lies." The war had shifted. No longer was she a pawn. She was becoming a force beside him. And together, they were about to face the storm that had been waiting all along. Her vow to uncover the truth became the fire that guided her through the suffocating days inside the mansion. She began quietly collecting pieces of information: newspapers, overheard conversations, fragments of gossip that the staff thought she did not notice. Every clue pointed to something larger, an invisible hand orchestrating her downfall. One afternoon, she slipped into the archive room of the mansion, where years of business documents and correspondence were stored. Her fingers traced the spines of leather-bound files until she found a folder marked with the date of the night she was drugged. Inside were receipts from the very cafe where she had taken her last sip of tea before waking in the nightmare wedding. The signature on the bill made her heart stop. It was not his. It was a relative, someone from his own family. The realization crashed over her. She had not been the target by chance. She had been carefully chosen, trapped to ensure his inheritance and to destabilize him from the inside. That evening, she confronted him in the study. Her voice trembled, but carried steel. "I know it was someone close to you, someone from your own blood. I saw the receipt." He froze, the shadows from the firelight flickering across his sharp features. For a long moment he said nothing, then exhaled heavily. "I wanted to protect you from this truth. But you are right. It was my cousin. He wants the empire, and he used you to try to break me." Her stomach twisted with both rage and sorrow. "So I was just a weapon in a family war." His gaze softened, his voice quiet. "At first, yes, but now you are far more than that. I cannot deny it anymore." Tears pricked her eyes. "Then fight for me, not with silence, not with coldness. Fight for me with truth." Again. For the first time, he reached out and held her hand, not as a contract, not as a possession, but as something fragile and real. "I will," he whispered. "But know this, when we bring the truth to light, it will tear this family apart, and it will put us both in danger." She lifted her chin, her heart pounding with both fear and defiance. "Then let it come. I would rather face danger with honesty than live another day in this gilded prison of lies." The war had shifted. No longer was she a pawn. She was becoming a force beside him, and together they were about to face the storm that had been waiting all along. The days that followed the attack were filled with tension, but they were also filled with resolve. He no longer hid the truth from her. Together they began to gather evidence, tracing every thread of betrayal back to his cousin. Sleepless nights were spent in the study, poring over documents and phone records, piecing together a picture of the conspiracy that had begun with her being drugged in that cafe. When the final proof was in their hands, he looked at her with steady eyes. "Once this is revealed, there is no turning back. My cousin will lose everything, but so will the illusion of peace that has protected this family for generations." She took his hand, her voice calm but unwavering. "Then let the illusion fall. We deserve the truth, and the world deserves to see it." The courtroom was packed the day the evidence was presented. Journalists filled the benches, cameras flashing as lawyers laid out the trail of lies and manipulation. Every eye turned when her story was told, how she had been drugged, trapped, and forced into a marriage, not by fate, but by design. Gasps echoed through the room when the receipts, recordings, and testimonies revealed his cousin as the mastermind. For the first time, she saw his mask of cold detachment shatter in public. He stood tall, his voice firm as he faced his cousin. "You tried to destroy me by destroying her, but you failed. Because she is stronger than you ever imagined. And together, we are stronger than you will ever be." The verdict came swift and merciless. His cousin was stripped of inheritance rights, charged with conspiracy, and escorted out in disgrace. The headlines that once branded her as a gold digger now called her courageous, a woman who stood against cruelty and deceit. After the trial, as the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted questions, he reached for her hand, not as part of a contract, not as an act for appearances, but as something real. "From this day forward," he said softly, so only she could hear, "you are not my prisoner. You are my partner, my equal, my choice." All tears filled her eyes as she whispered back, "And you are mine." The storm that had begun with betrayal ended with truth. The forced marriage, that once felt like chains, had transformed into a bond forged in fire. As they walked out of the courthouse together, side by side, the noise of the world faded. What mattered was not the cameras, not the wealth, not the empire. What mattered was the promise they now carried, not a promise written on paper, but one etched in their hearts. And for the first time since that fateful night, she felt free. Free not because she had escaped him, but because they had finally chosen each other.